Hello everyone, I'm Victoria. Since the beginning, my relationship with my mother-in-law has been challenging. She's always had a way of making me feel less than welcome, making it clear she didn't see me as a suitable partner for her son. This tension only grew when my husband and I decided to purchase our first home together, with him financially contributing to a portion of it. My mother-in-law seized every opportunity to criticize my decorating choices, and even went as far as giving us decorations that clashed with our style, knowing how much I longed for a beautiful living space. Her actions escalated to trying to create a rift between my husband and me by feeding him false stories about things I never said or did. Despite feeling hurt, I chose to believe that everything would eventually sort itself out without my interference. However, there came a point when I knew I had to defend my self-respect. In an attempt to mend fences, I invited her over for dinner, hoping to smooth over our rough past. I put a lot of effort into preparing a meal I thought she would enjoy, based on my husband's suggestions. Sadly, she hardly ate, criticizing the food right from the start, comparing it unfavorably even to what one wouldn't feed animals, and suggesting I lacked basic cooking skills. Despite my attempts at reconciliation and my explanation that the dinner was meant to be a gesture of peace, not a showcase of culinary excellence, her response was dismissive and derogatory. She insinuated that being married to her son wasn't impressive enough for her standards and continued to belittle me throughout the evening. The situation was further strained by her constant negative comments, making the dinner uncomfortable for everyone. My husband, unfortunately, did not support me in these moments, choosing instead to remain neutral and suggesting that it was something the ladies should resolve themselves. This lack of support left me feeling isolated and invalidated in my own home. This experience highlighted the ongoing difficulty of navigating my relationship with my mother-in-law, emphasizing the need for understanding, support, and possibly boundaries to maintain my well-being and dignity in this family dynamic. When challenges arose, Brian often suggested I overlook the issues and give his mother a pass. A vivid memory is from my aunt's birthday celebration. She transformed her basement into a creative haven where we could paint while enjoying wine and snacks, a delightful concept meant to bring joy and relaxation. However, the atmosphere shifted with the unexpected arrival of my nemesis, my mother-in-law. Happy birthday, Auntie. This setup is amazing. Combining painting with wine is genius. I greeted her warmly, genuinely excited about the evening's theme. Thank you, dear. It's just something to help everyone relax and enjoy themselves, she replied, pleased with my reaction. However, my enthusiasm waned as I learned of my mother-in-law's presence. I'm quite surprised to see Diana here, I admitted. Oh, Diana and I get along well. I adore her sense of style. Apologies for not mentioning I invited her. I know there's been tension, but I hope this might be a step towards mending fences. After all, she's family, my aunt explained. Aware of my discomfort around Diana, who often treated me with thinly veiled disdain, I sighed. She can make things so difficult with her attitude. I understand. Just try to enjoy the evening and not let her bother you, my aunt advised, offering a kind of solace. The night took an awkward turn when my mother-in-law, in an eye-catching and somewhat inappropriate shirt, accidentally smeared paint on herself while indulging a bit too much in wine. My aunt and mother rushed to assist her, and, not wanting to leave my mother to handle Diana alone, I reluctantly joined them. In the cleanup, I overheard a conversation about Gabriel, my husband's old-school adversary, now romantically involved with my mother-in-law. Gabriel had a history of treating me poorly, a fact well known to my husband, Brian. Hearing Diana boast about Gabriel's transformation and lavish treatment of her, while knowing Brian's feelings towards him added a layer of complexity and discomfort. Brian, unaware of this development, would undoubtedly be upset by the news. My conversation with Diana about Gabriel only fueled her antagonism towards me, further straining our already tense relationship. Brian's reluctance to confront his mother or defend me in these situations left me feeling unsupported. Determined to assert myself and address the ongoing issues directly, I decided it was time for a candid discussion with Diana. It was clear that waiting for Brian to take a stand on my behalf wasn't an option. Facing these challenges head-on, I aimed to find a resolution, or at the very least, establish some boundaries for the sake of my peace and dignity within the family. In our conversations, I've often pointed out to Brian that it feels like there's a deliberate effort from his side to stir up discord between us, an accusation he invariably denies. "What do you mean? I've never done anything of the sort," he'd argue, but the evidence speaks volumes. Take, for example, the dinner where he barely engaged with the meal I prepared, choosing instead to lace his minimal conversation with thinly veiled criticisms. "Oh, that? I just wasn't feeling well," he'd dismiss, brushing off his behavior as nothing significant. Then there was the incident at my aunt's party, where he decided to wear an overly revealing shirt and ended up getting excessively intoxicated, resulting in a messy paint spill over himself, a spectacle that required my mom and aunt to intervene. It was an innocent mistake, he insisted, downplaying the incident as though it had no underlying implications. And let's not overlook the matter of Gabriel, Brian's childhood nemesis who's now romantically involved with him. Aware of Brian's disdain for Gabriel, I find it perplexing that he would choose to be with someone who has caused him so much past anguish. "Gabriel is a changed person, and Brian should move past old grievances," he would argue, neglecting to see the strain such associations place on our relationship. I've even gone so far as to give him an ultimatum to inform Brian about this relationship himself, or I would take it upon myself to do so. The hope for a harmonious relationship seems increasingly futile as these issues pile up, reflecting a broader pattern of disregard and detachment in our marriage. This was further exemplified by a particularly revealing phone call, shedding light on Brian's general apathy towards our shared life. Living with Brian has become akin to cohabitating with someone who's utterly disconnected from our household's daily realities. He spends his days in passive leisure, neglecting household responsibilities and contributing little to our shared life. His apathy extends to our emotional bond as well. He often dismisses my concerns and emotions, leaving me feeling alone in our relationship. An example of this disengagement is evident in mundane requests for assistance around the house, such as doing the dishes, which are met with resistance and excuses. "I'm busy," or "I have other things to do," he'd retort, despite clear evidence to the contrary. When it comes to financial contributions, he paradoxically expects rent for using the basement as my office, despite my significant financial input into our home and living expenses. This dynamic has led to intense frustration on my part, culminating in a confrontation where I expressed my dissatisfaction with his laziness, his entitlement, and his failure to stand up to his intrusive mother. His behavior and the ongoing tensions have made it increasingly difficult to see a future together, underscored by a growing realization of our profound disconnect. Brian's reliance on my efforts has become increasingly apparent. My days are filled with long hours of work, up to 13 hours daily, from the comfort of our home, a benefit granted by my senior specialist position at the firm. Despite having purchased our house in full, I've utilized the basement as my workspace, yet Brian insists on treating it as a rental space from me. This arrangement, among other things, has pushed me to my limit. I'm at my breaking point, I confessed, airing my frustrations about his lack of involvement in household chores and the constant meddling of his mother in our lives. "You need to make a stand, both in support of me and by contributing more to our home. Without change, I can't dismiss the idea of divorce," I stated, hoping for some sign of understanding from Brian. Yet, his response was silence, followed by retreating to complain to his mother, who, in turn, would lash out at me, exacerbating the situation. The tension escalated when my mother-in-law, emboldened by her son's grievances, confronted me with divorce papers, tossing them at me in a demeaning manner. "You're causing too much harm to my son and your marriage," she accused, dismissing any plea for reason or understanding. "Prepare these papers with your signature by tomorrow. I won't tolerate any resistance from someone as worthless as you," she declared, her words laced with contempt. She then taunted me about my impending move to their place for the summer, gloating over the control she believed she held. At that moment, filled with resolve and a clear understanding of the dynamics at play, I retorted, "It seems you've overlooked the reality of our situation. Brian's lifestyle, the gifts, and the vacations are all funded by my hard work and earnings. So, don't presume your position is untouchable." My words aim to shed light on the contributions I've made and the unsustainable nature of their expectations, challenging the narrative she sought to impose and highlighting the necessity for a significant shift in our current predicament. In a confrontation filled with revelations, I made it clear that their lifestyle, including the lavish gifts and the car, was financed by me. "You're mistaken," my mother-in-law protested, unable to believe the extent of my support. "Brian has been dependent on my income and the so-called rent he charges me for using my own space. His lethargy has reached a point where it's unbearable," I explained, my patience wearing thin. Her disbelief was palpable. "Brian, my son, would never live off someone else," she argued, refusing to accept the reality of our situation. I countered, "I've been overly generous, and both of you have exploited that kindness. You're both draining me, and it's time for a change." As I contemplated the divorce papers, a sign of my imminent freedom, I was interrupted by an unexpected apology from my mother-in-law. "Please, don't finalize the divorce. I was unaware of the financial arrangements. I admit I've been harsh, and I'm sorry," she pleaded, a surprising turn from her usual demeanor. Her apology, however, felt insincere. "An apology now? After everything?" I retorted. She continued to beg, revealing her role in encouraging Brian's dependency. "I can't continue this cycle of enabling and exploitation. Your suggestion that I continue paying rent to live in my own house is absurd," I responded, my resolve strengthening. Brian, too, emerged, attempting to appeal to my sense of commitment, but it was too late. The realization that my aspirations for a family and a harmonious home life were unattainable with his and his mother's current attitudes solidified my decision. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I stood my ground against further manipulations. As I walked away, the papers in hand, I was acutely aware of the gravity of my decision, but also the peace and self-respect it would restore to my life. The dream of a loving, supportive family seemed more distant than ever, overshadowed by the reality of a toxic environment I knew I had to leave behind. Reaching a breaking point, I called my mom and aunt, the three people who've always been my pillars of support. I needed a comforting ear to vent my frustrations about Brian's lack of contribution and Diana's overbearing nature. "I just don't know what to do anymore," I confessed, feeling overwhelmed by the situation at home. I explained how Brian spends his days idly, not bothering with household responsibilities or contributing financially, while I bear the financial burden, even paying rent in my own house to afford him some pocket money. Despite attempting to discuss this with him, his defensiveness and lack of effort have left me feeling helpless and alone in our partnership. "That's completely unfair to you, Victoria," my mom empathized, understanding the depth of my struggles. "He should be doing his part, especially considering how hard you work." Feeling a bit more resolved, I planned to have another conversation with Brian, hoping for a breakthrough. However, upon returning home, I was greeted by a series of voicemails from Diana, pleading with me not to leave, followed by Brian's dismissive and hurtful remarks. He even brought up Diana's new relationship with Gabriel, my old nemesis, and accused me of wanting a divorce for ages. His words stung, especially when he echoed his mother's sentiments that I wasn't good enough for him. The absurdity of his stance shocked me. "Not good enough? Have you ever looked at yourself lately?" I countered, pointing out his continued unemployment and lack of personal care, which only further highlighted the disparity in our efforts and contributions. Brian's reaction suggested a mix of realization and defiance. He seemed to think the threat of divorce was a bluff, a lesson to make him see his faults. But I was beyond such games. "This is insanity," I declared, my decision firm. I informed him of my conversation with my attorney and my intention to proceed with the divorce. Throwing the $25,000 at him, his share of the basement, he and Diana could only watch in disbelief as I stood my ground. Refusing to sign the divorce papers, Brian left me no choice but to threaten legal action against both him and his mother for their exploitative behavior. "What about us? Our life together?" he asked, still not grasping the severity of his actions. "Good luck," I replied, my heart heavy, but my resolve clear. "I hope you manage, but don't ever contact me again. You need to leave by tonight." As I walked away from this chapter of my life, Brian's protests that none of this was fair to him echoed emptily behind me. The decision was tough but necessary for reclaiming my independence and dignity after enduring such a toxic situation. Leaving Brian and his mother, Diana, was a monumental step towards reclaiming my peace and autonomy. Despite Diana's pleas and her dramatic appeals for me to reconsider, I recognized the necessity of distancing myself from their negativity. Brian, whom I had once idealized, turned out to be a far cry from the person I thought he was. Making the tough choice to move on from them marked the beginning of a serene chapter in my life, one that was long overdue. The journey wasn't without its moments of self-reflection and guilt, given the years I had invested in a relationship that only served to diminish my spirit. Yet, the decision to forge a new path was propelled by a determination to never again allow myself to be a victim of manipulation. In the wake of their departure, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery and growth. Relocating to a new city, I purchased a home that symbolized a fresh start. Professionally, I ventured into business promotion, collaborating with former colleagues to establish a firm from the ground up. This venture, though fraught with challenges, was rewarding and signaled new beginnings and potential for further growth. Bobby, I'm truly grateful for your support. I shared with a colleague, optimism lacing my words. The future looks promising, and I'm keen on exploring expansion opportunities for the firm. Additionally, my life was enriched by the adoption of a son, a beacon of happiness and purpose. Our moments spent soaking in the sunlight at the park were my new definition of joy. However, the shadow of my past with Brian and Diana lingered faintly. Diana's occasional calls, laden with requests for financial aid, were a stark reminder of the life I had left behind. You and Brian are responsible for your own lives, I asserted, unwavering in my decision to sever financial ties. Their hardships, while unfortunate, were consequences of their actions and choices, not mine. Diana's attempts to elicit sympathy by sharing their dire straits, including Gabriel's abandonment, failed to sway my resolve. I've moved past our history, and while I wish you no ill, I cannot be your safety net, I maintained, closing a chapter filled with manipulation and unfulfilled promises. My focus was now firmly on the future, on my son, and on the life we were building together, far removed from the turmoil of the past. I decided to give Diana a chance to speak, not wanting to set a poor example for my son by reacting with anger. She shared a recent conversation with Gabriel, which only confirmed my decision to no longer allow her manipulations to affect me. Gabriel, you've been distant. What's wrong? Diana inquired, hoping for reassurance. Diana, I can't keep acting as your ATM. I thought there was more to us, but I can't ignore the truth any longer, Gabriel admitted, revealing his true intentions. You mean, our happiness was a lie? Diana was taken aback, searching for any signs of the love she believed they shared. Frankly, yes. I was in it for the money, hoping to gain access to Victoria's inheritance. It's clear now that marrying you won't bring me any closer to that. You and Brian are just dead ends, Gabriel coldly confessed, shattering any illusions Diana held. His harsh words, describing her as old and a financial burden due to her health issues, left Diana devastated. Despite her plea for empathy, Gabriel made his stance clear, prioritizing his financial interests over their relationship. Hearing this, I felt a mix of vindication and pity, but remained firm in my decision to cut ties completely. It's unfortunate, Diana, but you must take responsibility for your choices. Don't contact us again. Good luck with everything, and I hope Brian finds his footing, I said, closing the conversation and blocking any further communication from her. Later, I learned that Brian had indeed found employment as a custodian, a job that, while honest, underscored the dire financial straits he found himself in. The thought of him struggling financially didn't elicit my sympathy, given the past exploitation of my generosity. Diana and Brian's situation deteriorated further, with them finding refuge in a shelter, and Brian eventually being forced to live under a bridge. Diana, due to her age, managed to secure a spot in the shelter. Despite the grimness of their circumstances, my focus was on building a brighter future for my son and me. We moved to a new home, leaving behind the house associated with so many challenging memories. Our new home, complete with a pool and a spacious yard, represents the fresh start we craved. Signing on new clients and enjoying our time swimming and playing in the yard, my son and I have found happiness and peace, a stark contrast to the turbulent times now behind us.